Hi, this is Eternal King here, bringing you another LOR video today. Um, I wanted to do a quick LOR update just because I hadn't done a video in a while, and basically just run through some fundamentals of the game that I'm seeing some people missing for the Eternal format. Essentially, right and wrong card inclusions, must-have card inclusions that you essentially can't play certain archetypes without. So like really basic, include these cards in every single one of your decks. So the first one, PNZ Mystic Shot. It goes in every PNZ deck. I can't think of a single reason why you wouldn't want to include Mystic Shot in a PNZ deck. Just like, this is like LOR, Mogwai fundamentals, day one stuff that the game is really not developed beyond. And it is something that everybody should know at this point. Because I was running some games and they were just like not even real games in my mind, because they were just like one-sided solitaire matches for me, because the opponent just wasn't building their decks properly, perhaps because of playing too much single player Path of Champions stuff. But there's certain things that you need in to play Eternal in every single one of your decks. So it's more useful just to go to card inclusions here, and we'll just do spells. I'm sure I've done this before, but we're going to do it again. Certain spells that just need to be in every single one of your LOR decks, otherwise the deck doesn't function. So yeah, Mystic Shot, mandatory 3 of every single PNZ deck. Demacia, it used to be single combat, was the mandatory card, but the thing is they printed a straight upgrade to single combat, so now you run Gentleman's Duel. Every single essentially Demacia deck should be auto running 3 Gentleman's Duels as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't really matter what it is. When we did like a 5-minute brew for Scouts, I was running Gentleman's Duel in a Scouts deck, even though there wasn't any amazing targets. It's just too high value not to run. And you can do this for every single region of the game with Shadow Isles. The auto-include card used to be Vile Feast, but the thing is that has changed, right? So like, I know it can be confusing because it used to be back in Swim's day, you just auto-include Vile Feast in every Shadow Isles control deck and you were kind of done. There are cards that are better than Vile Feast. So for example, Glare, I think, is a better auto-include than Vile Feast in most cases. And then if you're not on the Glare, then you should probably be on Soul Harvest, right? So I would say that Soul Harvest is the auto-include, and then if you don't want the Soul Harvest, then you're probably on Glare. Those are kind of your two choices. I know there's slow speed, but it's still correct. So basically Glare and Soul Harvest, and it's a toss-up for which one is right, whether you want the Pokey Stick or whether you'd rather have the hard removal. But those are the cards you run now. It's not Vile Feast. I think it is Glare or Soul Harvest is correct, in my opinion. Then we have Targon. Targon's a very complex region because there aren't any great auto-includes. You could say that Pale Cascade is a very good card that goes in a lot of Targon, and that's still the case. I don't think there's anything wrong with Pale Cascade. And speaking beyond that, it's a toss-up, right? If you're in a healing-based deck, you're probably on Guiding Touch. You might... Falling Star isn't it. It's kind of... but there are cases in very slow Invoke decks with like Cosmic Call where people would be on like the 3 Falling Stars, but it's very rare. So Targon is actually a region that I struggle with personally because there are no auto-include cards in Targon. It is very, very interesting the way that you can build out those decks. It's very diverse. Moving on to Shurima, auto-include cards are mostly creature-based, so like Forsaken Bakai tends to go in like all Shurima decks. There's very few reasons why you wouldn't run Forsaken Bakai. Just having a 2/1 for 1 mana that draw fixes is insane. It's just, it's proven the test of time to kind of go in every single Shurima deck, even something like Azir Aurelia. It's greatly improved by including Forsaken Bakai. Even with Emperor's Army, you get like double the potential draw fixing. It's very good. Forsaken Bakai is the auto-include Shurima card in every single deck. Going beyond that, we can talk about Noxus. In terms of like Noxus auto includes, it is an aggro shell, right? It's usually like Legion Rearguard, Legion Saboteur that goes in every single Noxus aggro shell. Their auto includes in Noxus. And then you also have things like Decimate on 6 and Noxian Fervor, right? These are sort of auto-include cards in Noxus that you run in pretty much every single Noxus deck if you're playing optimally, in most cases. There are certain meme decks where you're just trying to be weird, where you might not want to do that, but for the most part, it's pretty high value. Talking about Ionia and the way that you build an Ionia deck, it really is interesting in terms of Ionia auto includes. Ionia is probably one of the most diverse regions in the game, so it's very hard to point to anything anymore that isn't auto include in Ionia. Let me take a quick peek at my optimal rise list and see what I'm running in Ionia that I'm like 100% needs to be there. Yeah, it's nothing. This is all tech. Like, Ionia is the highest tech region. There are no auto-includes in Ionia, specifically speaking. So Ionia is a lot like Targon, where there are no auto-includes. So like, if you're a beginner in LOR and you're just coming into the Eternal format, I would say stay away from Targon and stay away from Ionia, because they're like the least auto-build regions in the game for the most part. And then Shrima, Noxus, PNZ, Shadow Isles, Demacia, that all feels pretty easy. Talking about Freljord, increasingly I think Freljord moves away from a lot of its tricks, right? So it used to be that Troll Chant was an auto-include. Troll Chant's considered too low value. These days, slightly better than Troll Chant is probably going to be Sky Splitter, right? So Sky Splitter's a little better, but I only really run these types of Freljord tricks in decks where striking has to happen. So like something like a Teemo deck. Teemo needs to strike to get value, right? So including things like Elixir of Iron and Sky Splitter is really good in a Teemo deck, but for the rest of the time it doesn't really matter. It's too low value. In fact, I would say the only auto include is once again a creature, and it's Snowdog, right? You basically run Snowdog and you run Omen Hawk. Those are the auto includes for Freljord now. There's very few Freljord decks that does not benefit from Omen Hawk, Snowdog. So that's fairly auto include. Vandal City. Again, Vandal City is pretty diverse in terms of its construction. Yeah, not a lot of auto includes here in terms of control package. You used to run Make It Rain. Most people are off Make It Rain these days. I've seen Heavy Metal get some play. Most people are off Heavy Metal these days. So it really is just a case of a lot of Vandal City relying on its creature pressure for the most part. And then beyond Bilgewater, we have Vandal City. And Vandal City, it is pokey. So like pokey, I can tell you, is an auto-include. And in fact, sometimes you might want to double stack the pokey and the glare, because they're really good cards. Really, really strong cards to have glare and pokey and have access to them in the same region. Really good fundamental stuff for Vandal City. But let's go beyond that and talk about how do you build a deck. Once you know what your auto includes are, how do you build a deck? We've done it before on stream several times, but I think in this case it's probably more useful just to review my auto includes and why they make into the deck and why they don't. So mid-range Freljord, Three Sisters, that's the auto include for mid-range Freljord. You run it in an Ash deck, you run it in a Jax deck, you run it in every single mid-range Freljord deck. You run it in Thralls, you run it in every single mid-range Freljord deck. There's not a single mid-range Freljord deck where you do not run Three Sisters. If you're on a hard ramp shell, that's like the only time you can excuse yourself, and even then, because that's only because you're on like Harsh Winds usually. So yeah, Three Sisters auto-include. Obviously, when you're building for Jax, you run the Entrancing Lure as your sort of cycle removal card. So instead of Glare or Pokey, you Entrancing Lure your equipment cards. Like that's your auto-include for an equipment deck. Fish Fight is your replacement for your Demacia Strike card on 3 mana. So all these things basically teach you how to play LOR appropriately, because you start at the auto-includes and then you build out from there. If you're running a Noxus control deck, you're 100% on triple flock. Like if you're playing Noxus control, you're on triple flock, you're on triple disintegrate. You never not run that. Those are your auto includes in that kind of shell. And so, can you break the rules? Absolutely. But you have to have very good reasons why you want to break the rules in a particular deck or a particular construction. You talk about Temple, and like, yeah, Temple has to run one of everything. So it's on, one Glare, one High Note, one Mystic Shot, one Pokey Stick. It's on one of everything, because that's how you turbo Seraphine. But otherwise, if you were running this deck normally and it wasn't a Seraphine deck, say it was just like Ezreal Janna, and if I was to build this seriously for Ezreal Janna, I would drop a lot of the ratioing that's here and just sure up on certain things. Like I would just be like, well, I want 3 Pokey Sticks, and I want 3 Mystic Shots, and maybe I want 3 Glares, right? And I just like play that as a very solid ping ratio solution in this deck, and like I would feel fine doing that. Honestly, it wouldn't feel bad for the most part. If the whole point is just to target things cheaply with Ezreal and get him turbo leveled, then yeah, you run your cheap pings and you run the cycle pings as well, because that all counts as targeting. But you basically kind of hone in on this style of deck building that is consistent, it is powerful, and it is reliable. And you have to, the best difference between a good Eternal player and a bad Eternal player is being able to look at the extended card pool and immediately locking in what you should and shouldn't be doing in a certain region. So for example, when I wanted to revitalize Hecarim, I knew that I had to be on the auto include of triple Dragon Ambush. This card was nerfed from 5 to 6 mana. It didn't matter because it was the only way to consistently win with Hecarim. It's Dragon Ambush. And then if you're going to run Dragon Ambush, you know that you're on the Gwen because you need to buff the dragons to heal more and push more damage potentially. And that means you're on Strike Up the Band, and Opulent Foyer is auto triples, and you're on Moonlight Glenkeeper and Soul Shepherd's auto 3-ofs because they buff your ephemerals, and then you're on Triple Shark as a guaranteed 3-of. And then, you're probably on Redeemed Prodigy as a way to snowball the Gwen. And like you kind of see how the way that you play these decks and the way that you build these decks, they start from the auto includes and then they kind of move upwards as the deck goes on. And that's like the only consistent and accurate and proper way to build a deck in the Eternal format, is you start at the auto includes and then you branch outwards. And while I have said in the past that you can win games, like pickup games, just by being weird, right? Like you smash the auto includes of Noxus with the auto includes of Freljord, and then you jam, Katarina in there to like rally with big overwhelm units and just like do weird stuff, and like sometimes that's gonna work. I've proven that you can win with weird decks. I've proven that you can win with top tier decks. I've proven that you can win with off-meta constructions like elusive spam, right? Like you won't find this list anywhere in Runeterra anymore because this is optimized swim elusives. You can't find it anywhere except here, if that's something that you care about. But yeah, swim elusives is absolutely 100% competitive with the way that I've ratioed it out and the way that I built it. Assuming that you know the optimal play patterns, you're usually in a good spot. But yeah, that's it for this video. I just want to check in and talk about like people seem to be like struggle bussing in Eternal right now. They just don't know how to play the format. They don't know how to build for the format. And like, again, you talk about like Thralls. You can't play Thralls without Promising Future right now. Because without Promising Future, you're not going to have the necessary power scaling to make Thralls competitive in the extended card format. It just won't get there. You have to hard commit the Promising Future and hope, maybe eat a deny, but you got to do it. And then you got to duplicate that Promising Future landmark with Thalia. You just have to. That's the play that wins you the game with Thralls sometimes. Just like the Dragon Ambush is the play that wins you games with Hecarim sometimes. So yeah, people just, they're not committing hard enough to certain win cons. They're not running their auto includes. They're not running the appropriate answers on curve to certain issues. Like, again, always think that somebody out there is going to play a good deck in Eternal. And right now, one of the best decks in the game is, of course, going to be Emp Army Azir Aurelia. It's the deck that I built At the last expansion, it has remained one of the best decks. It was highlighted by Sunny. Everyone agrees that Emp Army is one of the best decks in the game, and everyone agrees that my Rise list is the best in the game. There are no ways around these certain things in the format, and the only way around them is to have appropriate answers. When Sparring Student comes down, you have to have the ping. You can't just chump them out with garbage. It's not going to work in your favor. The Azir Aurelia is going to like essentially just turbo out Aurelia, level her. You won't be able to kill her, or the cost to kill her is too expensive. You need to have on-curve answers. Sparring Student comes down, you have the ping for Sparring Student. Whether it is the 2-mana Cycler, whether it is... I don't love the 1-mana kill card in Shadow Isles. I think it always misses for me. So like I'll tell you right now that I don't love Quietus. Quietus used to be meta. I don't think it's meta anymore. I typically just prefer the hard 2-mana solution. It's a little more expensive, but the Soul Harvest never miss. There's very few decks where Soul Harvest will ever miss, in my opinion. But it could be a mixed ratioing solution between Quietus and Soul Harvest. Some people do like 2 and 2, and like that's not terrible. But yeah, that's the only right way to play Eternal, strictly speaking. Is like, yes, you can be weird, you can meme, but the further you get away from core LOR, the further you stray from core LOR. Generally speaking, if you're a novice player, or even a mid-tier player, or just a novice Eternal player, you're not going to get there. Unless you learn your auto-includes, you learn your fundamental deck designs, you learn your turbo win cons, you learn your appropriate answers. It's just like fundamental LOR stuff. So like for example, if I think that Ziggs Vex is like one of the best decks in the game, because it is objectively speaking one of the best decks in the game, I've run this into meta Temple and I still came out on top. So you're running this, right? So your opponent just spams out 1-drops. You have to have an answer. Your opponent then plays their 2-drops that also commit burn to face. This commits 2 damage to face. This commits 1 damage to face. They have their Pokey Stick. They have their Stone Stackers, which also commits 1 damage to face. That's 1 damage to face. All these things. This could potentially be 1 damage to face. Then they play their Bandle City Mayor, and then they cycle into something big. You cycle into your big 6-mana card, your big 5-mana card, something chunky that's not in your deck usually. You use RNG to win you the game that way with Bandle City Mayor. Then you just play, you know, your Ziggs, your Vex, and they're just hard to answer. And they auto-ping the opponent's board, and then you burn them out. It's an exceptionally powerful deck when it comes to fundamental core LOR, and you can't get around it. If you can't beat this, you can't play LOR. If you can't answer the Vex on 4, the Ziggs on 3, the Stone Stackers on 2, and then the 1-drop, like if you can't just do that, you don't get to play the game. In the same way with the Azir Aurelia, if you don't get to answer the Sparring Student, the Emperor's Dais on 2, the Azir on 3, you don't get to play the game. So that's kind of my big advice to you, is that learn the fundamentals first, and then you can play weird stuff. Then you can, like, you know, pilot elusive spam with 100% win rate, which is, you know, the swim special. Like, you can do that once you've learned your fundamentals. But yeah, or in fact, maybe it's better to run something like this where you don't need to be strong on the fundamentals, because the deck kind of builds itself. That's another way to go in, is just like pilot something easy where you don't have to worry about blocks, you don't have to worry about optimal attacks, you don't have to worry about proper spells and answers and pings. You can just run like a keyword soup style deck that I would build for you. That would certainly work. But let's look at Thresh Nasus. So we talked about Shadow Isles and like optimal Shadow Isles. Let's see the exact ratioing we see here. 1 Quietus, right? So 1 is good. You don't want more than 1. The 1 Soul Harvest, okay. The 2 Vile Feasts, 1 Hate Spike. Like, this is a very nice mixed ratioing solution. It's just like, I know the 1 Soul Harvest will get value. And then if I draw 1 Quietus, even if it whiffs, it's not a big deal. And then I'll have the 1 Hate Spike, which is good. And then, yeah, the 1 Death Grasp. And it's just like a nice mixed ratioing solution. There's a little bit of everything in here. You got your pings, you got your hard removal, on-curve answers, and then like a ton of creature spam. Mostly this is a creature spam shell. But if you want to learn like Shadow Isles control, Shadow Isles creature control, start with this. Start with Thresh Nasus. Just play your, you know, Bakai Reaper on 1. Play your Fading Icon on 2, or your Cursed Keeper on 2. Then play, you know, Caretaker or Hate Spike onto it. Sometimes you might Vile Feast, I guess, the Keeper. But yeah, just spam creatures, spam cheap spells, and then play Thresh on 5 and then Nasus on 6. And just try that first before you start thinking that you're like a hardcore LOR master. Because trust me, the stuff that works against the AI is not going to work in a real game of Eternal with like against a top competitive player. This is Eternal King, signing out.